Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Grow Your Tutoring Business. I nearly said the name wrong. I don't know why. It just got stuck in my mouth there. Welcome, Charlotte. This is Charlotte Watson from Wonderlearn. No, Wonderlearn?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I was going to write down Wonderlearn, but I actually wrote down Wonderful, which
Oh,
is lovely, which is great. Welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you here so we can ask some questions and dig around into how you started, where you are at with your business right now. I'm really excited to share what you have to offer or what you've been doing in the tuition space for how many years now?
coming up for 7 years in the tuition space.
So
Don't know
tell us a
where.
little bit about what you do, Charlotte.
So currently, I run Wonderlearn. I am a sole trader, but I seem to get my hands into lots of little extras as well, which we can talk about later.
Yeah.
But I run Wonderlearn. I started as a one-to-one tuition, a one-to-one tutor. Talk about getting your words mixed up. Because I left school, and we'll talk about that
Yeah.
later. But I left school teaching after 20 years, completely exhausted. I mean, I am one of those teachers, quite demoralized.
Yeah.
And I literally went into one-to-one tuition just to make ends meet, just to make sure I could pay the bills and get out of a situation that I'd really persevered with for 20 years, and then decided, no, now's the time to leave. And if you're wondering what I'm doing with my hand, I now have my cat Clyde here. I knew he'd join us, so if I'm doing weird things with my hand,
Brilliant.
it's because he'll just scream and meow. But over the year that I first started tuition, it became really clear in my area. I live in Wallington in the London Borough of Sutton, that I was repeating myself over and over again. I was constantly tutoring year 5 students who, to be honest, I don't think really needed one-to-one tuition.
Yeah.
They didn't have any special reason why one-to-one tuition was better for them. And I do think there are times, I don't think groups are right for everyone, but I was finding I was repeating myself. These children I felt would have benefited from more energetic and engaging lessons with other children. And I realized quite quickly I was literally tutoring for the 11 plus, or I was tutoring for GCSE. My specialism is English, so I decided to hone in on that. And I realized this wasn't the way forward. And living in London as well, even though some people can charge high prices in the area I was working with, the type of children I was working with, I couldn't charge massively high prices for one-to-one. And I just wasn't making enough money to, well, I was making enough to live, but not to thrive. And I was literally working all the weekends, every night, was exhausted. And I knew I couldn't continue like this. So I started introducing groups. And within about 2 years, I totally transitioned to group tuition. I totally transitioned purely to 11 plus prep from years 3 to 5, and obviously trickling into year 6. And then the children that I was working with also then wanted to stay on for GCSE. They wanted to continue from year 7 to year 11. So I also run just one group a week of for every year group from year 7 to 11. I do GCSE prep as well. After COVID, well, before COVID, I was completely face-to-face, but now I run 4 groups a week that are face-to-face because some of the younger ones still wanted some face-to-face tuition. And then I also run the rest of my groups online, mainly secondary, but also 5 groups of 11 plus tuition. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Wow, the hybrid approach to this is something I get asked about a lot, and I actually moved away from the hybrid approach this year because I struggled to sell online, which was, I think, my own energy towards it. Like I found it difficult the year before to fill up the groups, whereas
Yeah.
face to face, I just don't have the issue, and I really love the face to face stuff. However, I am a massive fan of starting out in a hybrid way. If someone was starting out for the first time, I'd be like inclined to say, can you, if you don't like online, can you just lean towards it a bit, figure out what you don't like, change something around it, and then, because I just think it gives you the most flexibility. However, if you are liking that face-to-face element, you can open up a different market still within your niche by
Yes.
having some options online. So how did you, when, because we were all forced to go online during COVID, how did you find that initially?
Like everyone else, a bit chaotic to be honest.
Yeah.
What happened was the hellish moment was that moment when we weren't quite in lockdown, but you
Mm.
could make choices.
That February time,
So
wasn't it?
yeah, so what happened was I had 2 awful weeks where term hadn't finished because we went in, I'll never forget that date, March the 23rd,
Mm.
2020. So around the beginning of March time, I was, as we said before, I was working completely face to face still. But I had students who were either feeling ill or who didn't want to come in. But I
Mm.
had other students who definitely still wanted to come in. So I had this awful thing where I had my tablet working. So I was trying to get people into the lesson while I had live children in the lesson.
Yeah.
But I was using Skype, which I absolutely hated. And children weren't using it properly. They were trying to dial in from their own number rather than from my number. It was chaos and I hated it. So I made the decision quite quickly. We can't carry on like this.
Mm.
Clearly, we are going into lockdown. I am going to go into lockdown early. We're going to set up, and I got rid of Skype straight away and set up Zoom. I gave myself a week off just to work around how everything worked and try and look at how things needed to change to be
Yeah.
online. And then we just went for it. But what I did do to kind of, well, acknowledge the problems some of the parents might have been having financially, but also the fact that I was still, if you like, a teacher in training or a tutor in training in terms of using Zoom properly. I'd
Mm.
used it a bit with Chinese students abroad, but it's not the same when you're running a group. I actually reduced my fees by 20% and said, look, this is to help everyone. It's to acknowledge that I might have a few struggles with my service, so I'm not providing you with the perfect service. I'm still learning, but also I know you might benefit from this reduction. So for
Mm.
over a year, I reduced, as I say, by 20%. And I think obviously that went down really well. It also gave me the leverage, to be honest, to make mistakes because I
Mm.
wasn't pretending I was
Mm.
fully formed. And to be honest, it went really well. I mean, I did offer extra lessons as well. So every morning, because I had in that first term when schools weren't having to offer lessons. I think it was the second lockdown, or it was a little while after schools were mandated to actually set up properly and run proper online lessons. So a lot of students were missing out because they were just getting sheets from school. They weren't in attendance of proper lessons. They were crying out for anything that I was offering. So every morning I offered some free lessons. We did language games. We had fun. We did book reading, just to keep them going, really, and to keep their love of English going. Because although they were obviously all still working for exams, I didn't want it to become drudgery. It was drudgery
Mm.
enough being in lockdown. So we did
Mm.
lots of fun things as well. I put on some Facebook videos, and then I still kept the lessons in the evening. They just wanted more of them. So it was like, now can you give us holiday courses? Now can you do this?
Yeah.
So I actually ended up working even harder in lockdown
Mm.
because I was offering my regular lessons plus extra that they wanted in terms of paid courses in the holidays, plus
Mm.
all these free lessons to keep them all going.
What's
And I obviously
interesting,
got other people then hearing about me wanting to join in as well.
I think what's interesting there is that that's a really common story for those who made the transition and went through that wobbly period in the beginning of figuring everything out, made something work. Suddenly it was their best year ever.
Mm.
And lots of people didn't then go back to what they were doing before. You know, they found a new model that worked. And we were, I think, as parents, as consumers, as people was worried, and parents who were worried about the effects of the lockdowns or not being in school, it did create this almost perfect storm of potential clients became really hungry for the support and they moved towards those that were doing it Have you kept any of those things around since? Did you like the holiday stuff and like putting in? I suppose I'm going to make it sound like your actual sessions aren't fun now, Charlotte. I know they would be, but like those fun sessions that you had, like you kind of just made sure they didn't feel all the same drudgery because we were all just
Yeah,
stuck indoors, weren't we, for
yeah.
23 hours a day. Did any of that stuff stick around?
The difficulty was that I had no time to fit it in because obviously the kids were then back at school.
Yeah.
So what I try and do is do a little bit of feed it into the regular lessons.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, at the moment, I've got a knock knock joke thing going on with one of my year four groups because we kind of it came about just because it was a word in one of their little spelling tests that we do, and the word was knock, and I just changed it into a joke, and then they decided they liked that. So I try and go with what the kids love, and we try and fit in little challenges, little games. The one thing I really am trying to maintain, but I just want to rework the model, is I want to get book clubs going again. But at the moment, bearing in mind I basically put in about a 50-hour a week because of my models.
Sure.
I run 14 groups a week plus a monthly writing masterclass. But obviously with 200 students, I do provide homework and this goes down incredibly well. And it allows a level of personalization that I can't have if I just run a group and don't mark anything. But you can imagine the tech that is involved and the amount of time it takes to mark lessons, mark work, and really give valuable feedback means I only have so many hours in the day. And I am still looking. I know there are online versions in terms of children. You can have a book group space on a website and they can kind of comment and interact that way. But again, what I have found, I mean, I've tried several times to create or to ask for interest in self-paced courses for children, particularly for my waiting list. I have like over 100 students on my waiting list, and I'm thinking, how can I keep their attention? I do obviously direct them to other tutors as well, and one way would be self-paced courses. But what I am finding time and time again is they want the live lessons, they want the interaction, whether it's online or face-to-face. And I did set up a holiday course once, which was self-paced. I had a bit of interest, but they really want the personality, they want the interaction. So things I'm working on.
Do you know what, Charlotte? There's a couple of things with this. The first one is that I feel that people show up when you show up.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a big thing. And the self-paced course it's almost like it is a different audience. Like it can hold people, but if they're waiting for you, they are going to wait. You
Yeah.
know, they are going to wait. Whereas if you were going to do something self-paced that was separate from what you do, it needs to be reaching like a different
Yes.
type. But that aside, actually, even having someone asked this question last week where it was like, I want to do self-paced courses. How do I do it? Where do I host and everything else? And I was like, look, operationally, those things are relatively easy to find out. Yeah, it's going to cost you a bit of money. You're going to have to really think about
Yeah.
how you set up your the content or how you want the user to experience the content and all of those things. But it is about who is it for. And it's so hard because like you do 50 hours a week all in with your homework and your tuition, and that works amazingly well. And the people who are moving towards you all want that because it is amazing. They're not the ones who want to do your
No.
self-paced. However, if it was like an added, like into the package, like something they could access as
Yes.
well as, then they've got a little bit of both. And that could be the start of a new audience. But
Yes.
how do you do that when you're working 50 hours a week?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. People have often said to me, how are you going to scale? Well, because I am at the peak of what I do in
Sure.
terms of scaling. So obviously there are options. There's franchising and there's turning into an agency or hiring more tutors. But again, why did I come out of teaching? Why did I come out of being in school? You know, at the height of my leadership, I was a deputy head, which involved also being Senko, which also involved being safeguarding lead, this lead, that lead, the other lead. I didn't teach. I was also supposedly in charge of a year six class, which was hilarious because, as you can imagine, how often did I see that year six class? It was ridiculous. And, I did a lot of other leadership roles. But of course, what happens is you end up managing, you end up being
Yeah.
taken out of teaching, you end up stopping doing what you went into it for.
Yeah.
And that is not what I want to replicate
Mm,
in my tutoring business.
mm,
So I'm at a turning point of deciding, what do I really want out of life? What do I value? What
mm,
I value is what I'm doing now. I
mm.
love it. I am a child when I'm with those kids.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
It keeps me young.
Mm,
I've got a bit of a diva personality in me. Like nothing better than getting that karaoke mic. I'm not a great singer though, but who cares? And I love the energy that being with students gives me.
mm,
Why would I swap that to manage other people?
mm,
Not that I don't love other tutors, love what they're doing, but that would take me away from what I love.
mm,
The franchising model, again, it's not something I'm looking at now. So, yeah, it's an interesting time for me. For
mm,
the moment, I am really happy, just really enjoying what I'm doing,
mm,
sharing my expertise where I can. As we've discussed before, there is a project I am working on
mm.
to be able to dissipate my knowledge and share it with other people in terms of group tuition. So I think what I'm best at doing is just sharing my expertise of my subject, which is English, how I teach, but in a way that can help others but not take away from me teaching. I, funnily enough, had a chat with somebody at Bond Books yesterday. I've written a book for I was going to say social media, Schofield and Sims, which is an 11 plus English book. Bond are very interested in working with me. So I think it's finding ways that I can fit things in little projects to really enjoy and package and sell rather than trying to change my whole business, if
You
you
know,
like.
I chatted with Arthur Moore. Have you met him or heard of
Oh
him before?
yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know
This was about it's quite a long time ago. It's probably back in August, September, and I really liked what he was saying. And it's pretty much the same as you. He was like, "Look, my business is at this level. I'm working this amount of hours. I'm around my children lots. I just don't see the need. It's serving me right now. I'm
Yeah,
okay." And I really
yeah.
like that because I think we can become obsessed with the next bit and the next
Mm,
bit, and we're chasing and we're chasing. And then suddenly we've taken ourselves out of the present moment again, which is, it feels like school where you're just
yeah.
going, well, I've got to teach, or do your Senko role, do your leadership role,
Yes.
and you're never really in one spot long enough to really appreciate it, because you're
Yes.
going, I like this my head was always full. It was like, right, now I've got to get to that bit, now I've got to get to that bit, and I've got to do that marking after, and I've got to make sure I update that system, and
Hmm.
then I've
Yeah.
got to go and observe the NQT or the ECT, and I've got to there was never a moment, like, I'd say I don't need a moment's peace. I think that's quite dangerous for me, but I also quite like the fact now I've got that choice that we were saying before. Like, if I think sometimes I put off the fact that I'm really busy, but often, like, my daytimes are quite free. Like,
Mm,
the bits I put in there are bits that I absolutely love.
mm,
But my evenings are busy because I still tutor, and I do
yes.
have a tutor and an assistant tutor come in and work. So even then, there's still stuff I can give away. But the rest of it is just the way that I want it.
Yeah. And that's it. For the first time in my life, when I started group tuition the way I wanted to do it, I felt free. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? I felt like
yeah,
this is what I was born to do.
yeah.
And when I can't, I mean, when I think about it, how did I last 20 years? But I know I'm very much a believer things come in their right time. And
Yeah,
I don't think if I'd taken it on any earlier, the opportunities would have been there. I
yeah.
don't think I would have had the confidence that I have because, I have a lot of, you can imagine the kind of parents I attract. They're very loving to their families, they're very
Mm,
ambitious for them, but they worry and they have a way of thinking that this is how you teach and how you are educated because of how they were, and they want to know it's going to be done like this. Now, sometimes I absolutely pedagogically disagree with them, and I say, look,
Mm.
you've got to trust me. I'm the teacher, stroke tutor. I know some people get quite hot on the semantics, and I do think there is a difference. And I think the reality is I'm teaching more than I'm tutoring, if I'm honest. But that's for another discussion. But I say to them, you've got to trust me.
Mm.
This is how I do it. This is why I do it. This is the research and evidence it's based on. This is my experience of it. Let me do it. And do you know what? I improved right nearly every time. I mean, I won't lie, I'm still learning. I will always be a learner, and I'm always willing to learn, which is partly why, especially during lockdown, I did get myself connected in a
Mm.
network, because I realized the thing about obviously tutoring, and I was obviously face to face. So I was, in Wallington, there was little old me. I tried to reach out to some other tutors, but at the time it was quite frosty, shall we say. Things are a little bit different now. But
Mm.
there wasn't a local network for me. And I thought, I don't want to become a kind of a loose cannon who loses touch of what good education is. And I go down a rabbit hole of ancient techniques as they are now. So, I did get myself a network, and I've constantly tried to pursue CPD in various ways to make sure I
Mm.
am keeping up to date. Obviously Chat GPT has blown my mind. I love it. But with that accountability in place, I am still free to make absolutely, obviously with parents in mind and what they like and what they want. I'm not kidding myself, but
Mm.
I'm free to do it how I want. And clearly, from what it seems, how I'm doing it is working because I'm full, I've got a waiting
Mm.
list, and I get recommended. So I can't tell you, yes, I'm still stressed every day. Yes, I work very hard, but I can't tell you, the biggest stress I had in education was not being able to do it the way I authentically knew it should be done, because there was a political agenda, there was an agenda of the school, there was whatever agenda there was. I
Yeah.
felt totally trapped.
I'm supporting a primary school in for their, well, I usually do either 3, 4, and 5 with the idea of early intervention before they get to year 6, that kind of stuff. But then this time of year, they're like, Rich, just go and help year 6, go and take the pressure off the teachers, do some intervention work and small group stuff. And so I go and like chat to the teachers, and there's a new teacher in year 6. He's not a brand new teacher. He's first year in year 6, so he's got experience in Key
Yeah.
Stage 2. And we were talking last week, and he was like, "I'm just starting to understand that we're playing a game, and it's horrible because the school do it because it's their figures, and we identify children to support in a genuine way. But when it comes to the data, it's like, right, those children, let's give them X, Y, Z, because look, this is the best we can do. It's about transition now, not SATs. These groups of children, that word cuspy children, we need to make sure we do all of the things to really give them the best chance. And then the ones at the top, which I have fought this time round, and I have got some great adept maths people, because I feel, and I don't do the English because it's not my expertise. I would tend to do the reading more than anything else. But the great adept maths, often this time of year, they'll be just given a harder, yeah,
Yeah.
differentiated type work rather than the actual teaching, because
Yes.
we all know those children who just see it once and get on with
Yes.
it. So I've got a group, a larger group mind. It's not ideal, but it just means we can get to grips with things like algebra and
Yeah.
ratio, and we can go take them deeper into the
Nice.
and the stuff which they would actually. I mean, they resist it, but when they start learning and unpicking it, they're like, oh, they needed that stretch, they needed that push. But we end up playing that game of looking at the numbers rather than the person, which I really didn't like at year 6. I understand, but it goes against a lot of the
Yeah.
values.
One of the worst moments, one of a really low point for me was when I was in year 6. We were looking at this group of children. We only had a certain amount of hours for an assistant to support. And
Mm.
it was like, well, they're not going to hit anything anyway. There's no point giving it to them.
Yeah, you're saying there's no
And
point.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
What are we doing? Yeah, what are we doing? As educators, what do we do?
yeah,
But that's the game. That's what he was talking about. We were saying we're playing the game. And that's not our fault. It's not our fault. That's just the system, and it's the system that we're given that we're going into. And I'm going to come back to what you were saying. You know, when you've got, I don't know how big your groups are. Mine sort of top out about 6 or 7, if it's the right group.
Yeah.
Um, when I'm with that group or those groups, oh my God, I'm in my
Yes.
zone. Like I
Yes.
can the autonomy behind being able
Yes.
to take them down any route. And this is the difference between teaching and tuition, in my opinion. We're doing algebra the other day and they wasn't really getting it. Now in a school setting, if I had 30 children, I'd know there'd be 6 in that room that would be okay. There'd be 12 who were like kind of okay and the rest wouldn't get it. Well, I'd have to really go and support the middle to
Yes.
what I call like the lower ability. But here it's like, okay, we're kind of all in a similar space. Some are okay, some are not. But I'm able just to slow everybody down because we're all going to
Yes.
benefit from it. We're all going
Yes.
to benefit by going, okay, why don't we support each other?
Yeah.
Why don't you
Yeah.
get it, Simon? Why don't
Yeah.
you come up and just show? Perhaps I'm not
Yeah.
saying it in the right way. Let's take 20 minutes here
Mm.
just to slow it down because we can always do more of whatever we need next week.
Mm.
And that to me is like being able just to stop, take
Mm.
stock of where they're at, slow it down, have the discussion. Don't worry about, well, playtime's in 20 minutes.
Mm.
Got to get it done. Otherwise, my book look's not going to go well. Or, you know, and that
Yeah.
that to me is the big difference. But
Flexibility.
I think I
Flexibility.
teach more than tutor in a sense that I actually quite like being at the whiteboard, talking, instigating discussion, letting
Mm.
that flow,
Mm.
rather than sort of being sat down with them. And I don't
Yeah.
know, but that's just my take on it. Perhaps that is still tuition for me as well. But yeah, I feel like I've still got that teacher approach, I think.
I think teachers do. I mean,
Mm.
I'll explain. So my groups are larger. The smallest group I've got is 10. The highest I've got
Wow.
is 17.
Yeah.
But in order to help, in order for those to be successful, I've put things in place.
Mm.
So, for instance, I make sure that the right kind of child comes to that group because obviously, if I'm,
Mm.
and this is why I have niched, because obviously, if I'm doing the 11 plus, they've got to be able to cope and they've got to be committed
Mm.
to the revision of it, the amount that's involved in getting them prepared. And
Mm.
we do a lot of talk beforehand. I do a meet and greet before we start any lessons. Obviously, in my code of conduct and my terms and conditions, I make it really clear what's expected. Having said that, the only assessment I do is a baseline assessment. And again, that's just in case anything gets flagged up. But I
Mm.
don't do an assessment to say, right, you're clearly upper level, you can come in, you're not, I won't take you, which is what some people do. There are
Yeah,
some
it
good
bugs me
reasons
that.
for doing that. Some of it I do suspect is because they only want people who they know are going to pass.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I have
agreed.
had a couple of children every year who enjoy the lessons and with an extra bit of assistance can cope with the material and
Mm.
enjoy it at home. But I have that honest, obviously,
Mm.
conversation with the parents. You do realize they're not going to meet the standard, but they are still making progress. Would you like them to continue? So,
Yeah.
although my groups are large, there is a level of personalization, there is a level of flexibility that's similar to you. If we want to
Mm.
talk about knock knock jokes, we can.
Yeah.
If I feel a child needs a bit of extra support, I'm happy to give them involved in the package a quick video tutorial on something or a
Mm.
quick guidance page on this. So, you know, I know if I had a truly mixed ability group, 17 would not be tuition at all.
Mm.
And we'd be all working on different things. I'd probably all have to set them just separate work and it would be more like a homework club. But
Mm.
that is why, again, I think finding your niche is important because then it helps you to see what is workable and what isn't,
Mm.
what can work and what can't. So if I was completely mixed ability, just pure English without any notion of the 11 plus, my groups would have to be smaller because I
Mm.
could not provide the intervention for all those children.
I think it's fascinating. Like when we talk about different models and way people do things differently, I love it because like when people start to hear like, oh right, so Rich has a maximum of 6 or 7, but then someone else has got 17, and we start like going, actually, what is possible, what's not. I was chatting to this guy. Did you go to the pencil spaces thing the other week? Did I see you?
The round table, yes, I
Yeah, yeah.
did.
So,
Talking about preparation, exam prep.
the I went to one on, I can't remember what day it was now. Monday, I think it was Monday evening, and there was a guy who's come over for Bet Show who uses pencil spaces from Australia.
I know who
And
you mean
you know what I mean? Did you meet
as
him?
well. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So fascinating. And I would obviously teach about how to set up group tuition as well. But the way I go about it is completely different to the way this guy was saying. Now, the actual, or I'd say not completely different. There were things that matched, and there was quite a lot of commonality until we got to the pricing. Because he did the same as what I did. I was like, well, and similar to what you were saying earlier, I was repeating lessons every single day. And it was like, oh, what? This is crazy. If I just put these guys together, I could do all this work in an hour,
Mm,
and I could have support more children. It just made
yes.
sense. And he did the same. I'm pretty sure he's a science teacher, um, or maths. I can't remember
No,
now.
he
I think
was science, I think.
was he science?
Yeah.
And he was saying that he did the same. He was like, look, actually, I'm not doing one to one anymore. It's just groups. That's it. If you want me, it's groups. If you don't want me, there'll be other one-to-one tutors for you. He's charging $60 an hour for one-to-one, and he charged $60 an hour to enter his groups.
Hmm.
And I was like, what? And he went, everybody stayed. I think there was a couple of people that
Oh, I've
questioned
done
it.
something wrong there then.
Right. And I was like, whoa. And we had this conversation. Well, he was just talking. I say we had this
Yeah.
conversation. It was a round table, everyone's involved. And he was saying that, look, people are not buying your time, they're buying the outcome.
Yes.
So if they're willing to spend $60 on the outcome, they're
Yeah.
willing to spend $60 on the outcome.
Regardless. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it was like, how many people in your group? And it's different, and it was different. But this was the other bit which I love, because it's about community, which is really
Yeah.
high up on my list of priorities. I think we create a community. We don't create a school when you're
Yeah.
tuition. I think it's the next level above. I think schools are really good communities, by the way,
Yeah.
but I think there's a level where it stops, just because the focus is so much on the data driven stuff that it's kind of watered down a little bit
You're
now.
absolutely right. I mean, what I love about my groups is they are so for each other. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we create this safe space,
Yeah.
even with 17 face-to-face
Yeah.
kids. I do have less in my, I have fewer students in my, well, I say fewer. One of my online groups is 15, but I'm not making it any bigger. And I try to stick around the 12 to 13. Again, it depends on the students,
Yeah.
though. You know, if they're perfectly capable, you know, I can increase the numbers. But, you know, it's just the community. And
Yeah.
even the online ones, because, you know, I've got my year 11s, some of them were with me from face to face in year 7, some even came earlier. But even when we went online, they still know each other. We have created a space. We can make mistakes. We can say stupid things. We can have a perspective that might not match what the poet thought, you know. And that is what is the most important thing about what I try and create, is this space where we are not afraid to have a go. I mean, you know, Carol Dweck's growth model for me is one of the things that is really crucial to my tuition pedagogy, if you like.
Yeah.
And it's about trying, you know, it's funny. I always say to the kids, like with their little booklets, I don't want to see any blank answers. I don't mind stupid answers. I don't mind crazy answers.
Yeah.
But what do you learn if you don't try? You know, you
Yeah.
get nothing from nothing.
Yeah.
And that is, as you say, what I love about the community. And funnily enough, I think it's the week after, I do this arty party for my year 6s who have now finished with me, but who all did the 11 plus. And I deliberately do it before Offers Day. Yes, they know if they passed or not, but everyone is invited, because it's their endeavour I'm rewarding, and their persistence and their resilience. But they love it. It's the, you know, it's the thing of the year. You know, you're going to the arty party. You've got to make sure you get. You know, they all love it, and they eat loads of rubbish. and they create pictures, and I deliberately do nothing to do with English, and we just have a great time, and they come together again and they enjoy meeting each other again if they're not from the same school, discussing things, finding out where they hope to go. And that is what I love. And I have students who I know will start with me in year 3 and will continue all the way to year 11. Not necessarily because they need it, but they love it.
Yeah,
And they
I
want
think
to
that's
stay.
such an important part of the business, right? There, something which I didn't appreciate at the time, but I totally get it now. Was about 4 years ago. Oh, I don't know. Was it 4 years ago? Because that's coming back to COVID time. No, probably 3 years ago. Someone said, imagine if setting up a business with the idea that you never ever lose a customer. And this was like, because it was outside of tuition, this business support. It was about all business, not just tuition. And I was like, yeah, imagine that. Because if you never lose someone and you only ever gain, that's a crazy business, isn't it? Like it will
Yeah.
just grow and grow and grow. You never, I mean, I know in tuition we obviously get a natural churn and we do lose people because they just grow
Yes.
up and they don't need it. But if you can have
Yes.
someone from year 3 to year 11, that is
Well,
some business.
unfortunately, I did have one student who then wanted me for A level, and it was at that point I was like, I cannot do any more.
You're done.
And I
You're
did
done.
actually then pass them to someone else who really appreciated that,
I
and
think
they
that's,
and
again,
then I kept in
integrity.
contact through them.
Yeah,
And then it's
lovely.
like, degree, no.
Do you know what? That it's going to bring you back to community. This, and I don't know whether you agree with this or not. And you probably will. But if you went to your group of 16, 17 and said, this is a large group, I'd really like it if we could split into two, they'd probably fight it. They'd want to stay as a group, but because they've gone through that whole process. And so sometimes, like in our minds, we might say, oh, it'd be a really good idea to kind of just have only 8 and we'll do like a, but that's not what they want. And I
It
think
works.
that's powerful.
It wouldn't work in every situation.
Mm,
It absolutely wouldn't. I am very fortunate that with the
mm,
kind of model I have produced, it works. And the way I work, it works. I wouldn't grow it anymore because I do
no.
think that is my limit.
Yeah.
And people do say to me, "Oh, it's online. Can't you squeeze me in?" And I'm like, I could, but then there won't be as much engagement, and
Mhm.
it will become more lecture style. And also, that's a lot more marking. I just don't have the time. And there comes a point I say, and I think again that's what they appreciate, that I do know my own limit,
Yeah.
and I'm not just doing it for the money. You know, I have modeled my pricing for what I think is affordable, but also giving good value, but also reflecting my expertise.
Mm,
But it takes time. This has been nurtured over 7 years,
yeah.
and obviously, I know someone talks about nothing. An overnight success takes years. Well, actually, it probably wouldn't have worked without my 20 years in school.
Right. I was going
No
to
matter
come
how
back to that.
miserable that was.
I was going to come back to that because you spoke about autonomy and the idea of being able to just use your time in the way that you think is most valuable, and that's how you support your children. And then you was talking about the passage of time and those skills that you develop as a teacher, and that what you went through in terms of the whole journey, whether it's emotionally, how you work with people, how you connect with parents, all of those skills that you build up, even training, like you're saying, you as a Senko, like those things all come into play, and then you're using it for the greater good. It's not about, oh, it's about you and your business and how you support people. I think we underestimate the passage of time. I think we do. We completely well, I don't know, maybe. I think some do. Like I had a tutor working for me, and it's almost like he wanted it all right now. And I was like, but if you look at where I'm at, it's been 6 years.
Yes,
It's been 6 years. I didn't just
yes,
go, I'm going to be a tutor, and suddenly I had an office with
absolutely.
60 children coming every week. I got in my car and I drove around to people's houses for 2 years.
I did that in my first year.
And
Yeah,
then
I did
I
that.
worked
Sunday
full time.
morning, 9 o'clock, I was driving to
Yeah,
Chelsea,
did the same. Did the same.
thinking,
Well, I
what
wasn't driving
am
to
I doing?
Chelsea. I was driving to Margate. Right, so it's a little bit different.
Whenever
Uh,
anyone says Margate, I immediately think of Chaz and Dave.
yeah.
Are you
I
old enough to know who they are?
random fact: I've seen Chaz and Dave in Margate. So I was about 4 at the time,
I was going to say,
and another bit of fact, he gave me his plectrum. Yeah, yeah, big
I am
Chad.
starstruck.
Yeah,
Chaz and Dave.
yeah. I had no idea who they was at the time, but
No, I
it's
bet.
fine. It's fine.
Yeah,
But look, like sometimes you have to go and do the hard reps somewhere, and for lots of us, the hard reps start at school. If you are listening and you're still in school working full time and you're just looking to make the exit, it might feel that you look back on the time spent as I
it's
want to say
not.
quite a waste of time,
No.
but maybe stressful or and just know that it's serving a purpose for you later on down the road. And it might not feel like that now, but you will look back on your time and go, I'm actually quite grateful for it.
And I'll tell you something, which I didn't know whether we'd have time for or not, but and I don't want to delve too deeply into this, but
Sure.
those 20 years, there were some amazing times.
Mm,
But as you can imagine, I had my own battle with depression through all of that. It's not something I
mm,
felt comfortable about talking about until recently,
mm,
because it's almost, and I know we talk about mental health more these days and we
mm,
talk about well-being, but there's still that thing, oh, what if parents know I've been depressed, you know?
mm,
But I am starting to be a lot more open about that. And if it wasn't for that experience of depression, I think I wouldn't have the compassion I have now. I get obviously a lot of parents and students who have issues with depression, stress, and anxiety.
mm,
It wouldn't have led me down the route of yoga and mindfulness, which I
mm,
really explored in the 2010s. I did several courses, accredited courses to really understand the science behind it. So it's ironic that, about 2 or 3 years ago, the government was trying to push mindfulness, like throw in mindfulness into school. It's
mm,
like, it doesn't work like that. You need to know a bit more. You can't just give people a colouring book. But what it's also done is really helped me understand some of the trials and tribulations the parents and the students are going
mm,
through. And it's brought an aspect to my tutoring in terms of well-being and also when I was in school supporting teachers, I
mm,
actually worked in a school that said, "Oh, look, we know you do yoga and mindfulness. Can you do an early morning session for us?" And I was like, "Well, only if you sign a waiver because I'm not insured and I'm not a trained teacher.
mm,
I was for children, not for adults." But they wanted it. People are crying out for genuine, practiced people to help them, not people who just kind of think, oh, I'll pick up on this bandwagon now. But it's
mm,
something. And I couldn't work the way I work if I didn't have that resilience that I built up through that journey with depression and anxiety,
yeah.
and with the mechanisms that I developed and the habits I developed to help me handle stress.
Mm,
So I couldn't do what I'm doing now if I hadn't been through all that.
mm. I think that's really important. What you've just said there is really important.
And
Really
I'm a
important.
very happy person. I'm known
Mm,
for my energy, my
mm,
enthusiasm. The kids love it, they get off it. That
mm,
doesn't mean I don't have struggle. And I think
mm,
I'm starting to feel a lot more confident in being able
mm,
to share that.
mm,
But, and I have bad days. Like, we
mm.
cancelled because of my perimenopause issues, which again, I'm not afraid to talk about anymore because the
Yeah.
more we do talk about it, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I'm going to sit on the side that I don't understand it
That's all
because I'm
right.
not going to go through it, but I'm always willing to learn more, always. And I think we are better about these things as well. One of the first person that I kind of connected with was actually a woman who was supporting other women with perimenopause and the menopausal, I say issues. I don't know whether that's the right word to use, Charlotte.
Challenges,
Yeah, thank you. Challenges. That's
experiences.
better.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I was like, oh wow, that's fascinating because actually, from like someone who knows nothing about it, like I didn't realize the challenges that women face around this to the point where what she was actually championing was writing it into policies, company policies, and having a structure around. what sort of support was needed. And I've often thought that. I mean, I think I've been super fortunate in my just my career in general, in that I've always worked in offices or I work for social services, so social workers, senior practitioners, primary mental health workers, predominantly women.
Mm.
And so I've kind of had a window into it, but without actually, as a young man, not really understanding the issues. But I've always looked on and thought, I feel that, and I'm seeing teaching way more than anywhere else, where just the odds are just stacked against.
Mm.
There's someone who, always pops to my mind, someone who's such an amazing teacher. She was leading EYFS, but she could have led the whole of the Key Stage 1 because her knowledge was just up there, and she was a bit like yourself, like you feel an energy, like I'm passionate about this. And she's left teaching because she's had two children, and when she came back, was like being a cover supervisor and didn't get slotted back in the right way and felt undervalued. And I totally get it. And it's like, just because you went off to have a family. And I
Yeah.
find that one, I mean, on the face of it, it will sound discriminatory, right? Because I
Mm.
feel like it does probably fall down that path somewhere, but I'm sure a school has an out. But that school's also run by the SLTs. They're women,
Mm.
which again, like, I don't know, I thought that would have been a protective factor. And I know that will be the same for lots of people, right?
Mm.
And then you go through and you think it just stacks up against, doesn't it?
Mm.
I don't know. I mate,
And
that's that.
again, well, interestingly, again, I don't think I could have managed my symptoms, if you like, and
Mm,
my challenges if I was still in school. I think
really?
tutoring, no, even though you could argue I do a 50-hour week, which, if I tot it up, I do, but it's 50 hours I can put anywhere
Yeah, yeah,
apart from
yeah.
the
I get
actual
you.
commitments. So when I had a really bad day, when I had no energy, and I knew I had a stack of marking to do, but I knew I just couldn't face it, I was able to manage it in a way where I could do it differently.
Mm,
Similarly, when I had COVID
mm,
in 2021, I was able to teach online still. I mean, I felt dreadful, and you could have argued I should have taken some time off. Very difficult when you're self-employed and still in that kind of financial turmoil that I was at the time. But there are so many ways in which I've been able to manage things, challenges that I don't think I could have if I'd have been in school. And I remember when my father died in 2019, I took a week off, obviously. And then I actually discovered, okay, I just can't work as hard as I'm working. And I actually cancelled a whole day a week. And I said to them, look, this is temporary, but I am sorry.
yeah.
I am not going to be any good to you. There's no point paying you. And I had to trust that they would come back. And they did.
Mm,
And they
mm,
did. Again, not sure whether I would or wouldn't have, depending on the head, have been given that flexibility. So
yeah.
despite my workload, I can still find ways to manage in a way I don't think I would have challenges that come up in my life.
Do you know,
There we
it's
go.
it's fascinating to me to talk about this stuff just in general, because I think I can talk about growing a business, and we can talk about how the best way to do that for people on an individual level, and to support people through, whether it's the courses, or like I know that you're setting up like to help people grow groups with yourself and Samantha. Like you can support all of that, but when you, not from an operational level on how to do it, I'm talking about, but actually these experiences, and I'm talking about like how to handle them rather than the actual experiences, they serve that purpose so that you have the resilience when it doesn't quite go your way, the perseverance when you really don't feel like doing it, but you've got to. But underpinning all of this is the fact that you feel well enough to be able to make those decisions. So what comes back to autonomy for me always comes back to
Mm,
what's high up on the list. Why did I want to do this? Why did you want to start your
mm,
business? What are the reasons behind it? Because at the top, we're always going to say something like, because I just really want to help children. But
mm.
actually, somewhere in there, it's okay to think about yourself. It's okay to go, I want to be able to, when I don't feel like it, go, I'm not all right today. I
And
was
you
just going to put everything down.
absolutely have to, because it's not selfish. Because how can you deliver to those students and be your
100%
best
agree.
self
Yeah.
if you are not in that place?
Yeah.
And again, that's I'm not selling. I'm not doing mindfulness courses. Don't worry, I'm not selling anything. But where the mindfulness has helped me be able to gauge my feelings and
Yeah.
whether I can cope or whether I need time out and things like that. And those parents knew that. And that's the other thing about when parents see your authenticity and they see your passion for their child. If you need to take time out, as I did in that summer of 2019, they
Mm,
are committed to coming back because they know you will be back and they know you will bounce back and they know you're
yeah.
committed to their children.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
gone
No,
really serious.
yeah. And yeah, well, I think some of this stuff is like, because you've been in the grow your tutoring business group for a while, and you've been in business for yourself for a good amount of years now. And so people would have asked you for advice about growing a business, 100%, because that's why I started the group, because people kept messaging me like, how's it going? What are you doing? That kind of stuff. So I know you would have been asked. People ask operational questions all the time, like, how do you find clients? Well, how do you run your groups? What resources do you use? Now, all of that stuff, it has a space, right? Of course it does, because people need to know that. And it's easy to go like, what mistakes did you make? Let's learn from them. So, that's kind of true.
Yeah,
How, if you
except, sorry to say, I
go,
must interject, there is nothing better than learning from your own mistakes. I'm just
yeah,
putting it out there.
yeah.
But we'll move on.
Yeah, yeah. But
Your
underpinning
point.
all of that is
Yeah,
if you are not okay,
yeah,
if you are not resilient, if you're not in a space where you can deal with rejection, if you're not in a space
yeah,
where someone
totally.
leaves your tuition business and you're not going to be able to get out of bed for a couple of days, which in the early stages it was what I was like. I was lucky. I say lucky. I value what I do and I love doing it. But there were still times when it wasn't the right fit and
Mm,
someone go, Rich, I'm not going to do it anymore. We're going to finish. And I'd be like, absolutely crestfallen,
yes,
and it
yes.
wasn't until a bit later on when you start thinking, actually, I've got to really work on my mindset. I've got to
Yeah,
up level something. I need to surround myself with other people who are going to be experiencing the same thing or perhaps further ahead of me that I can just lean on every now and again.
yeah.
And this is where like memberships come in. It's where creating your business network, having people around you are going to go, what, you've lost one student, but you teach 200 a week. Don't worry about it.
Well,
Or, you know,
interestingly, I did have that chat with Sam recently where I was like, oh, I've had a number leave and it's because of this and it's because of this competition and they can't fit it all in. And I'm taking it personally, which
yeah.
is the worst thing you can do because I
Mm,
know none of it is personal. And she's like, well, what have you done about it? I said, well, I've been able to fill it with the people on the waiting list. And so she's like, well, what's the
business.
problem? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's a problem because to quote an old policy, every child matters.
Yeah.
So when a child does, I mean, there's been a few where I know it's the right fit for them to go and move back to one because they have either had neurodiverse needs
Yeah.
or some other kind of issue. And I, in fact, instigated the conversation to say, look, I am not the best fit in this situation. But, when a couple of others left because they're just too busy doing too many tutoring and they choose someone over you because, I don't know, it's nearer or cheaper, you can't help it. I still do. It's not that the
Yeah.
storm goes away, it's how you deal with the storm that
Yeah.
changes. I have
Yeah.
storms every week,
Yeah.
like yourself, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
say, it's how you learn to deal with them.
Yeah.
And going back to your point about time, it does make a difference. I would say my number one, particularly for going into group tuition, this isn't everyone's opinion. I respect other people's opinion. They have different methods, different models,
Mm,
perfect for them. But for me, time has been the key factor.
mm,
And for me, the maturity, the resilience, like growing a plant, it doesn't come overnight. And I
mm,
know I'm at the right place at the right time now because of
mm,
everything that's gone before. And I would just, say to tutors, just don't be afraid to give it time.
mm.
I
I think
know
that's really good advice. Yeah.
everyone wants to be there straight away. I have
Yeah.
people say, I want to be where you are.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, have you got 7 years?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
You could argue it might not needed 7 years in this day and age. I
But
came into
that
it
but then
pre-COVID.
that's where like you're going to impart some knowledge out there to help people
Yeah,
do it in a quicker
quicker.
amount of time, and that's
Yeah,
the value. And that's that's exactly how this works, and the cycle will continue forever and ever and
I
ever. You
hope
know,
so.
that's the point. That's a really good space to leave it there. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on,
you.
imparting some wisdom. It's always amazing to share space with someone new. We haven't met before. I know we've chatted through text, but it's great to chew the fat over some of these things. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.